What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Thank you so much for joining us with the most precious thing you have, your time, as we continue to do what we always try to do, turn down the noise of the news cycle, get to the information that actually is needed for us to better discern the times we live in. Don't just react to the caterwauling and the nonsense, but actually try to figure out what's going on so that we know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and more importantly, how we're consuming news media and social media information to get to that point of knowing what's going on. There's one thing going on right now in politics that I want to address. We're in a little bit of a silly season. The Republican primary, of course, is kind of a mess. Trump's way ahead, so everybody's kind of waiting for something to happen there. Joe Biden's going to be the nominee. I know something called a Dean Phillips is running against him technically, but there is no Democratic primary because President Biden isn't participating in it. He's going to be the nominee. That's it. You're wasting your time thinking about anything else. However, folks have been panicking over President Joe Biden's poll numbers, and they are bad. The most recent, the Siena New York Times poll, we'll link to the poll. You can look through it. First thing I do with polls, and a lot of other people do this, it was taught to me, and I'll explain to you, don't just read the headline, don't just read the blurb, don't just read the piece that accompanies the poll. Look at the actual poll. Is it from a reputable source? What is the information provided? And then find out if that article links to the actual poll. I don't mean the article about the poll. I don't mean the graphic they put up about the poll. Does it link to the actual poll work? And if it doesn't link to something that's usually 10, 20 pages, multiple graphs, multiple charts, multiple breakdowns, it has all the methodology. That's what we call the crosstabs. It's how they got that information. It tells you how many people, how it was segmented, how it was weighted. If the article and the information doesn't link to that information, you need to just go ahead and discard it offhand. If it does have that information, look at it and see if it's a poll of 300 people that was conducted online, you probably aren't real good. If it's a poll of 1,200 registered voters or likely voters that's from a reputable source and they have a lot of data on how they did it, now you got something you can work with. But even in that, you got to look at it. How many Republicans are in the poll? How many Democrats are in the poll? How did they weigh independents, which is a huge methodology, especially in things like swing states. Primary polls, you got to be careful. If they're weighing a lot of Democratic and independents into a Republican primary, well, the independents and Democrats aren't going to get a vote in that Republican primary. Some independents might in the states. So you got to weigh that in there. There's a lot that goes into these polls. Here's what I'm going to say about all the panic over Joe Biden's poll numbers. Yes, there's a problem for Joe Biden in here. If you look at these poll numbers, there are important constituencies within the Democratic Party that don't particularly like Joe Biden. Very young, very progressive voters. Some of the black vote is starting to bleed off him in the approval numbers a little bit. Latino voters are starting to bleed off a little bit. And there's some other groups, but those are some big ones. Let's pause and back up for a second. Why is Joe Biden president right now? Joe Biden, go back and remember, everybody's got short memories on these things. Joe Biden's campaign was considered dead, in the water, over with after Iowa and New Hampshire. Remember, they couldn't even figure out who won Iowa. We talked to our friend John Deeth about that a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't listened to that, go listen to John Deeth talk about Iowa. He knows more about Iowa than anybody. That's why we talked to him. Joe Biden lost in Iowa and he lost in New Hampshire. It looked like Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg was going to be the nominees on this thing. Remember, now Vice President Harris, she didn't even make it into calendar year 2020 with her campaign. She had to drop out. She became the VP. But then something interesting happened. The primaries weren't in those singular states like in Iowa, which is a very unique environment, or like New Hampshire, which is a very, New England, very cloistered kind of environment. They went to South Carolina, went to places like Nevada, went to other states with more diversity. These groups that now aren't polling great for Joe Biden were essential to his return and how he charged back and basically wrapped up that primary within a couple of weeks after those first two early stumbles. And it was primarily the black vote in South Carolina that propelled him forward. Latino voting he did very well in. The youth vote came out strongly for him. Democrats have been winning the youth vote for quite some time now. We just talked about that on this program. Go back to listen to that program. Talked about it with Jonas Dew and why that is. I bring up that context because there's something important. There's two things I want to bring up. One is for this immediate election and one is for the following elections in 2028 and going forward. The immediate thing for this election is I think there's something going on here. A lot of folks are just not paying attention to this primary. A lot of normie voters who aren't very online like we are, especially like I am that does this all the time, aren't paying attention to all the ins and the outs of it. I think a lot of them just don't believe that Donald Trump's actually going to be the nominee. I believe he is. I may be wrong. If I am, I'll come on and say it. Maybe they're right. I think Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. I think he's going to wrap it up pretty quickly. And I think we're going to get a long spring and summer of him and his trials as the nominee and all that mess there. I think once that happens, the reality of all this is going to crash in on all those normies, the independents, the folks, the moderates, the folks that don't really pay close attention to things, the voters that went from Obama to Trump and then to Biden, those voters, they're going to all of a sudden go, oh my God, this guy's actually going to be on the ballot again. And I think you're going to see some numbers change. I know there's not a lot of enthusiasm for Biden. There wasn't in 2020 either, but he got record-setting turnout in the end. Why? It wasn't because he was Joe Biden. He got record-setting turnout because he wasn't Donald Trump. If you put Donald Trump on the ticket, a much more damaged Donald Trump, a much more disliked Donald Trump, a much more off-the-wall Donald Trump than he was in 2020 by every measure, a Donald Trump with much less broad support, although his core support has gotten more fanatical, if anything. You put him on a ticket across from Joe Biden, that's going to fix a lot of Joe Biden's problems electorally in a hurry. You think the young progressives are going to sit out an election where Donald Trump might win? You think that black vote that is the sole reason that saved Biden's bacon? Remember, Jim Clyburn and others in South Carolina came in, and that's what turned that race. That is an essential group of voters for the Democratic Party. Biden got over 90% of them. You don't think they're going to run home to Biden? You don't think the progressive voters are going to run home to Biden to prevent a Donald Trump? And more importantly, and one thing to watch in all these polls, because all these polls that show Trump doing well, almost all of them I've seen have been overvaluing independents going to Donald Trump. I don't think that'll be the case. I think the independents and the moderates are either going to not vote for Trump or Biden, either one, or they'll vote for Biden. They're not going to go for Trump. I don't think you'll see these trends happen until the reality that it's going to be a Donald Trump, Joe Biden redo election sinks into the people who aren't really paying attention to it yet. Once that realization hits, you're going to start seeing these numbers change. So are these numbers great for Joe Biden? No, they're not. Is it sense for concern if you're in the White House or a Democratic person that wants that team to win? Yes, it is. They've got a lot of work to do. But they've also got a Trump card, no pun intended, coming. And that's when you put Donald Trump on the under end of the ballot, probably a blue spray painted fire hydrant's going to get really good numbers just for not being Donald Trump. And Joe Biden can do a little bit better than that on certain things with the core constituencies inside the Democratic Party. Remember, I said there was two things I want to talk about. One about the immediate election. Two is for the future. Part of this that some of our Democratic friends I don't think have reckoned with yet. I said this on TV one time with the Young Turks, Dr. Rashad Ritchie's program. He agreed with me on this. After Joe Biden, the Democratic Party is going to go through some things. What this poll is telling you, Joe Biden is the last consensus candidate for the old Democratic coalition that they're going to accept. And the only reason they're accepting this one is because Donald Trump's on the other side of the ticket. If the Republicans was running anybody, even mildly acceptable to a bigger portion of the country, they would probably win this presidential election pretty easily. But it's going to be Donald Trump, which means Joe Biden, I would put as the favorite in that race because of all the Trumpian Trump stuff that Trump trumps. Now, in the future, after Joe Biden passes off the scene, what these numbers are telling you, the very progressive folks, the other parts of that constituency inside the Democratic Party, they think their time is long overdue. There is not another consensus candidate like a Joe Biden anywhere on the bench that can bring all these various groups together. Now, maybe the Republicans run somebody that's so offensive to people that it may not matter and they'll be able to push somebody up and through. But this is something to watch. The Democratic Party has made a lot of hay on just not being the party of Trump for quite a while now. But once Trump passes off the scene, they not only lose a foil to play off of, but they have to present who they are standing alone as they themselves are. And they have some divisions inside their own party that they're going to have to work out in-house. And frankly, some of this progressive and the more moderate stuff, it's been boiling for a long time. And without Trump to rally around, they're going to have to work this out in-house. Our Democratic friends are going to have some things they're going to go through after the Trump era finally ends, whenever that is. They're going to have to figure this stuff out because like him, don't like him, think he's boring, think he's too old, think whatever you think of Joe Biden, he saved their bacon in 2020. He's president of the United States, and as of right now, he's the front runner for 2024. Once he passes off the scene, now what are you going to do, Democratic Party? More Hertel right after this.
That's the sound of your current hype level at the gas pump. But brace yourself for something fuel nominal, because Unleaded 88 is about to take the hype to a whole new level. Unleaded 88 is cheaper, cleaner, and greener than regular unleaded. Plus, it's homegrown, making Unleaded 88 the clear choice at the pump and totally worth the hype. So pump it up with Unleaded 88, brought to you by Iowa Corn.
Menards is your electrical headquarters. We carry all the tools and testers you need for any electrical job. Stack up your toolbox with Southwire electrical products today. Right now, save big money on Southwire electrical tools, testers, cable ties, wire, and cable. Shop our huge selection in store at Menards. Ranked #1 in customer satisfaction among home improvement retailers according to J.D. Power. For more information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Save big money at Menards.
At Baker's Pharmacy, care is what's most convenient for you. Care is being here when you need us. We're open evenings and weekends. Care is helping you save more. Most insurance plans and discount cards are accepted at your local Baker's Pharmacy. Care is saving you time by managing your prescriptions online. You can request refills, check order status, and more. Care is convenience that works for everyone. Baker's, a world of care is in store. Services and availability vary by location. Age and other restrictions may apply. For coverage, consult your health insurance company. Visit the pharmacy or our site for details.
Welcome back to Hertel. He's back, Yael Ossowski, our very good friend from the Consumer Choice Center. We love having him on, one of our oldest friends and guests on the program, going all the way back to the radio days. How are you, my friend? Great to see you again.
Yeah, things are all good here, Sir Andrew. We're trying to survive the clocks backwards and things. We always do this whole daylight savings rigmarole every couple of months, and nothing gets passed. Everything changes all the same. We still have to change our clocks and suffer with young kids that wake us up at all hours.
Yeah, it got dark early, and the sun came up faster this morning, and the dogs were very confused. That's basically all I got out of all of that. And the trick-or-treaters had to stumble around in the dark and the cold, but what do you do? I can't believe I'm actually going to let you talk about this on my program, although I love having you on there, but let's talk aliens, buddy. You already corrected me once. We know the old nomenclature, UFOs, extraterrestrials, ET, aliens. There's new terminology, though. Educate me, my friend. What is this new terminology, and why are we remixing this?
Well, it goes back to the terms. So we've heard for a long time unidentified flying object, which essentially just means anything in the sky and we don't know what it is. Can't see it on a flight tracker. It's not a military plane. It's not a weather balloon. We just don't know what it is. And it was classified as such. So in the last, I would say 7 years, that terminology has been changed. So we don't say unidentified flying object anymore. The official government nomenclature is now unidentified anomalous phenomena, and meaning essentially anything that's in the sky that we can't explain or that we have not yet decoded what it is. So why are we talking about this? It really goes back, I would say, to Senator Harry Reid and to Congress. I'm keeping it in the lanes here, but we've had, through a mechanism of government amendments to various funding bills to the NDAA, there has been made money available to different parts and elements of both the intelligence and defense communities to uncover what documents, what information, what evidence our government has on different UAPs. So that goes back all the way to Roswell, 1947, but it also is the weather balloons that you might remember were floating above your house there, Andrew. That was in early February and late January of this year. And in these kind of scenarios, what we've gotten is various committees. We've had congressional hearings, and we now have had 3 specific task forces funded by Congress, hosted within either the Defense, Navy, Space Force, all these different agencies. And the entire idea has been to try to figure out who has what information on any UAPs we've ever had classified, and to try to figure out a process for eventual disclosure. So it has nothing to do right now with non-human intelligence, aliens, little green men. It has everything to do with what's in our skies. Where does it come from? Is it from adversaries like China or Russia, or is it just technology we don't yet understand? That is the main premise of it all, and I think is something that does warrant a bit more attention than perhaps we've given it the last few years.
Yeah, we joke about the alien part of it, but there's actually really good work that needs to be done here. You mentioned Harry Reid, for the uninitiated, the longtime senator from Nevada. The reason that's important, the United States government owns, I think it's like 85, 90% of Nevada. Most of Nevada is test ranges for the government. That includes Area 51. No, they don't do aliens there. It's just where we do a lot of test flights and stuff like that. People live in Vegas. They fly out there. They do all this stuff out in the desert, along with a bunch of other places out there. Thank you very much. This stuff's important, though. We talked about the balloons from China. We know that there's, increasing. We now have multiple countries that can put satellites in Europe. Most of them are friendly. Some of them are not. Space is getting more accessible to more people. You now have private entities, not just SpaceX with the Starlink stuff, but other people. The Chinese are up there. The Japanese are up there. India is becoming a space power now. We have to keep track of the skies for a lot of reasons. It's not just the Cold War that ICBM might come in with the nuke. There's intelligence reasons. There's weather phenomenon, climate phenomenon that we got to keep track of that shows up sometimes. There's a lot of legitimate reasons for this stuff.
I think there is, and it does come down to security. And probably the most watched hearing in Congress for a very long time was a House Oversight subcommittee hearing in which you had a purported whistleblower by the name of David Grush who was formerly of Naval Intelligence, later a part of something called the UAP Task Force, which was funded by Congress. And he gave testimony as to various interviews and documents that he had seen about whether there was a crash retrieval program for UAPs in the past. There are all these different elements, but I think what was the most important is that there are things that are in the sky that we don't know where they're coming from, whether it be China, Russia, or elsewhere, and we don't currently have a system to properly track and disclose that to responsible parties. And this has been kicked up just in the last few days. There is something called the AARO. I have to be sure I get all of my things correct here. So this is the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And this is another agency that is part of the Defense Department, which was per the last NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, given authority to cover all UAP sightings of government folks and military contractors. And what they have revealed in like the last day or two is they now have all this portal. They've received different sightings. They've received all kinds of documents and reports. And probably the biggest nugget that we have, not just this agency, but in the current NDAA that is now being debated on, it's being negotiated between House and Senate, there is a part in there called the UAP Disclosure Act. And it's actually pretty wild because it's not being talked about at all. It would actually give $20 million to a brand new review board that would be called the AARO Review Board. It would look at any of the large disclosures that should be made available to the public on UAP sightings or relevant government programs. So there have been various efforts at legislation to try to uncover programs that might be related to either sightings or research for many years, and we haven't gotten any information about it. And I think that brings up the second element of this. We talked about national security, but now it's also about transparency of our government, because there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are spent by the Pentagon every single year, likely upwards of $1 billion if we include pensions and all of that. And a lot of this goes out to military contractors that are not subject to FOIA laws. We don't exactly know where that's going. There's plenty of black budget, and for national security, we understand why that is important. But a lot of this stuff could be harboring technologies, vehicles, programs, documents. We don't know. And I think that's the entire point. And luckily, we have seen a lot of great reporting on this from many new upstart Substacks, other media organizations, even News Nation has done a lot of reporting on this. A lot of people might be skeptical, but I think that's the natural position, is we have to be skeptical. And right now, the main aim is to focus on disclosure and aim it at the government. And if NDAA 2024 is passed, there are significant features and programs that would actually aim at disclosing many things beginning probably by December of next year. So we'll see how that works.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Hey, Yael, Ossowski, Consumer Choice Center, joining us. To me, there's two prongs to this, and then we'll get to the little bit more crazier stuff with the aliens in a second. There's two practical prongs here that I think are important. One, you just touched on the accountability element of this. More accountability in government. We understand some of this stuff is classified, but that is also abused to hide other things. But the other one is one that you've kind of skirted over, but I want to go back and hit on because I think it's important. Our government finds really creative ways to get funding. And this has become a mechanism, and we've had Congress people in some of these hearings basically come out and say it's like, yes, we can slap this. We're investigating unidentified object or phenomenon, or they can kind of wink, nudge it to the conspiracy stuff. And now they've got a nice big set of funding to go after whatever they need to go to. Some things legitimate, some things not. I think the accountability and funding is the lessons to take from this, because those are universal principles to all government programs and all legislation and all regulation. That's stuff we should be doing all the time. And if we can use it in this instance to kind of get some focus back on, we need accountability and proper funding and things like this, that's really where we should focus on something like this. And if we got to use aliens to do it, God bless, at least we're talking about something important instead of the wackadoo Congress critters, right?
Well, yeah, and there are different elements of this. And again, this is all playing out in the last week or two. And there's actually an upcoming hearing that is off the record. It'll be held in a SCIF, a secure compartmentalized information facility. Is that right? I'm not the military guy, bro. And there was one version of this that was held with the Inspector General of the intelligence community and the Defense Departments, with various members of Congress from the Oversight Committee. These are elected people. You might consider them wingnuts on one week, and perhaps they voted against McCarthy another week, but they're still a part of this committee. And AOC apparently was also there, and that is where they were supposed to get a classified briefing on claims that were made at the last congressional hearing. And from what we know of that, from Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett, who has kind of been a leader on this topic, they essentially said they had no information, nothing to see here. It seemed that as if things were highly compartmentalized. But again, the NDAA, if that passes, will really put this on a rush. And you talked about the money. What the NDAA does, and it's the very last section of it, and this is a huge document, it's over 2,000 pages. It's how we fund the military and our defense. There's a part in here, I'll quote from it. It is the sense of Congress that due to the increasing potential for technology surprise from foreign adversaries and to ensure sufficient integration across the U.S. industrial base and avoid technology and security stovepipes, there must be blah, 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 elements of disclosure of any kind of technology that the U.S. has acquired. It goes on to mention things like propulsion and photon light beams, and I have no idea why that's in there. No clue. This is part of the official legislation that they're discussing. But again, these are all things that we as the public don't know. There might be private military contractors that have access to this stuff. I know it's not being integrated into my Amazon shipments. It's not being used when I go to buy a car. So a lot of this stuff is either not real or is not being disclosed or used so that consumers like me can actually benefit from it. So again, that's more of the whole part about having accountability. And as Mulder said in the X-Files, there is no government agency that has jurisdiction on the truth, Andrew.
They don't have jurisdiction on it, but they do seem to have a hard time dealing with, communicating, and or sticking to said Yael Ossowski joining us. This kind of transitions to something else I want to ask you about, something you've been on for a while. The Consumer Choice Center has been on this for a while. AI, because there's going to be some overlap with some of the stuff you just talked about, because a lot of what they're talking about with new technology, a lot of people are like, well, we're going to use AI to do this technological leap. I want to start with the nomenclature before we get to the regulatory thing and this new executive order that Biden just dropped on everybody. Again, AI, a souped up search engine, is not AI. It's getting called AI so people can get funding and startup and seed money. And we'll talk about how that stuff all works some other time. But, supersized Google is not AI. But there is such a thing as AI out there trying to be developed. I think we've got a nomenclature problem, especially when we start getting regulation, especially when we start getting executive orders. You just mentioned a sense of Congress. Well, we've all become aware of how jawboning works, where Congress says we want this to happen and companies adjust because they don't want the congressional pressure coming down on them. I think we got a nomenclature problem here because we're going to do a lot of regulating for something that doesn't actually exist, and we're going to end up screwing up innovation for something that could exist and could be a good thing if it's properly handled. And I don't trust my government to handle it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different elements to Biden's view of this. And, he's kind of following what the European Union has already laid out on artificial intelligence. I'll have an article about this out, actually, hopefully tomorrow. But what the Biden view of artificial intelligence and how it should be regulated is a very pessimistic model. And when you ask, what is the actual technology that we're talking about here? What we've seen primarily in the United States, a little bit in Singapore, a little bit in China, is we have these large language models. That's what they're called. And this is essentially just a huge database that has every possible piece of information, command, you name it. And we've been able to use that for generative art. You come up with various themes, topics, words, and I can output an image or video or different elements of your workflow. And what the Biden admin has done in this executive order is lay out a lot of very restrictive elements that really the only other bloc that's looking at this is Europe. And it's definitely not where I pull my sort of tech inspiration. But if we look at the order, a lot of it is just based on this risk model. So there's going to have to be a lot of reporting. Anytime that there's any update in your AI model, you're having to report that to the federal government in some capacity. You're having to register where you have your servers and your computers with the government. There will have to be a continuous review of your safety outputs on your product for government review. Again, there's nothing about how AI will improve our lives, living conditions, technology, innovation, and a very pessimistic view about how do we control this and restrict it. I think it's kind of problematic what we already have from the Biden administration. The focus here, again, he's using elements of law from the Defense Production Act, something that Biden has invoked, I believe now 9 or 10 times, to have various parts of executive authority. And this is supposed to be something used around wartime, but it's being used here to try to figure out how we can restrict and hopefully direct development in AI. I think it's the wrong approach. And I think it's actually very restrictive to the open source version of AI that already Facebook and Microsoft, they put out huge models open source online. Anyone can download them, use them, make their own products. What the Biden executive order does, it actually goes against that ethos and is going to make that more difficult, more costly. The compliance costs are going to go through the roof. And you're only going to have a few incumbents who are going to be able to afford this. And unfortunately, we're not going to have a Silicon Valley of AI if this actually goes through. We're just kind of going to have a very government, regulated, stinted program. And yeah, that could be pretty bad for the American people.
Folks, if you've listened to the Heard Tell program, you've heard our friend Gabriella Hoffman, but you need to make sure you're checking out her podcast, District of Conservation. It's a podcast exploring the nuances of true conservation efforts from D.C. and beyond. From topic discussions to exclusive interviews with conservation and energy newsmakers, Gabriella keeps listeners appraised of the latest news stories while elevating important voices. Listen to District of Conservation on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are played.
Religion is at the intersection of our 21st century life, even if we don't express a faith. At a time when it seems that religion isn't as prevalent as it once was, it still leaves its mark everywhere. As a pastor, I know that religion isn't something I just do on a Sunday, but it's found in every nook and cranny of my life. Sexuality, politics, social media, the economy, war, nationalism, all have some kind of religious angle to them. And as a communicator, I want to find the stories that can help people understand this part of our society that is so important to so many. Hi, I'm Dennis Sanders, and I'm the host of Church and Main. Church in Maine is a podcast about the journey of faith and where it intersects with modern life. I look at faith with a journalist's eye, asking the who, where, what, why, and how religion affects some of the major issues of the day. Join me as we journey together. You can listen to Church in Maine podcasts at the website churchinmaine.org or on your favorite podcast app. I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, Yael, Ossowski joining us. I think this is a good example of something that we've talked about for years now, because we've been doing this for years because we're starting to get old and you've been a friend for a long time. Appreciate you, by the way. We're doing this backwards. So basically, and Biden's doing this, but everybody else does it too. I'm not just picking on him, but he's in the chair, so he gets the blame for this one. The United States government as a whole, we do a really good job of trying to hold things accountable that haven't even actually happened yet. But then, like the thing we were just talking about with, the unidentified and the government investigation stuff, we don't want to actually do accountability for the stuff that has happened or is happening. We have this exactly backwards when it comes to accountability. We're scared to death of this future technology, so we're trying to hold it accountable while it's still in the gestational stages and you don't even know what it is. It's like Seven, what's in the box? We don't know what's in the box. Oh, it's going to be a severed head. You don't know that yet. It's just calm down. But we want to have all kinds of accountability for this thing way out there in the future that's scary, but we don't want to have accountability over Congress is doing right now or has been doing in the last few years. And then we go, well, why are we having budget issues? Why are we having government shutdowns? That's kind of a core reason right there is we're doing this stuff backwards.
Yeah, we kind of are. I think it does have a lot to do with rhetoric. And, your best buddy, Elon Musk, has talked a lot about the existential threat to humanity of artificial intelligence and AI. And one founder of a sort of Google AI, I think it's Andy Nig is his name. He made the point that many of these companies are like using these, worst case scenario doomscape things to really try to entrench themselves as the incumbents and make sure that, the regulations are something that favor only them, which, that's classic regulatory capture. But yeah, we barely have this, the generative AI and, the inputting, whether it be Chat GPT or something else, this has been around a year. We've actually seen a consumer facing model for a year. There's some impressive stuff, it is not changing the scope of our entire work lives. But again, this is step by step. And if you think that the entrepreneurs know the potential of this, you're wrong. They don't know. It's all entrepreneurial discovery. How is anyone who's in a bureaucracy or in a government agency supposed to also stay on the same level and then have some kind of approach that would be amenable to innovation, that would be amenable to protecting your rights online? We just don't have it yet. So I think the simpler approach, just keep the laws on the books, enforce those. If there are people who do things with misinformation, disinformation, do things around elections, we have laws on the book for that. I think it's just, we got to wait and see. Singapore is taking that approach. We've seen that with some Latin American countries as well. If we just allow the entrepreneurs to deliver us something and we can better understand it, perhaps there's a time to do it. I just don't sincerely see the case for coming down on AI on that much, at least with regulation through executive order. Perhaps something with Congress and hearings and accountability. There is another theme, but yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, and we definitely don't want to follow the EU because their tech sector compared to our tech sector, it's not particularly close right now, especially on innovation. Yael Ossowski joining us. I was just, it brought to mind a conversation I had with somebody who's extremely smart, way smarter than me. And they were kind of correcting me on something and they think on these things. And I made some comment about how the smartphone was a revolutionary technological step. And this is one of the smartest people on the planet stepped in. He goes, no, it wasn't. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it wasn't revolutionary. It was a consolidation of existing technologies into a consumer product where everybody had access to it. That's not revolutionary. That's a condensation of existing technology. And his argument to me, and it made me think, he's like, that's how you need to view the AI stuff. This is not going to be an revolutionary step that people think it is. It's just going to be another consolidation because it's just changing the format of how information is handled. And of course, his argument is stuff like, the computer age, that was a revolutionary step because that created the information wave that we're and the rest of this is surfing. Where do you see the AI stuff and where we are? Because we seem to be kind of in this little bit of a plateau technologically. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, but we're just putting new casings on the iPhone. We're not really inventing the iPhone, for example, things like that. How do you see technology, especially from the consumer side of it? We seem to be in a bit of plateau. I think people are maybe taking it for granted a little bit right now. I think that's fair to say. I think the regulatory stuff's getting a little ugly because they don't know what to do with this stuff. But how do you view it?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of happening all around us. And again, is everybody just putting together different features that will one day be part of a suite of products at Google or Meta or Microsoft? That's kind of been maybe the mantra of Silicon Valley the last 5 or 6 years, is hope to get acquired so you can become a feature on these. I think there are some elements that are obviously very helpful. And again, I mentioned using ChatGPT, for us writers, it feels a bit like cheating. So that's why I don't touch it too much. But definitely with images and videos and creativity, there's a lot that can be done. I think actually where I am a bit more, I will dip my toe into the pessimist pool. Otherwise, I'm a total tech optimist. I think, if we can apply this in any way to healthcare delivery, figure out ways that we can have better competition, lower cost, I'm all for it. The pessimist wave, I'm looking more at what are our restrictions going to be on how government can use AI. And this is not really addressed within the Joe Biden executive order. We already know how police departments are using things like facial recognition. There's a startup called Clearview AI that the reporter Kashmir Hill, I believe she's at New York Times, she wrote a book about this. They've been able to amass the largest photo database of any entity in the world, bigger than the US government. And they're selling that information to governments in order for those governments to take on investigations, all these different things. I think the legislative focus, while there's all this innovation happening, has to be a restriction on what governments can do with this stuff, how they're able to use it. If we think of like the worst case scenario, it's a Minority Report, Philip K. Dick predictive crime scenario. But we also have to find a way that we can still use our Constitution. We can still invoke our individual rights. All these things that are happening, I think will have a different use case depending on your industry, and it'll take time. And the greatest innovation might not be there. But I think putting restrictions on what government can do with it, I think that's going to be a more important question of our time than what, new whistle bell app is delivered to us on our phone. That's kind of how I'm viewing it for right now. Still very much a tech optimist. Just would not like to see too much discretion and power used by government, which would not only stop the entrepreneurship, but also perhaps down the line endanger our own rights and freedoms.
Yeah, Ossowski. Again, this is something of, these are very old principles we're dealing with. This is just the tech spin and tech nomenclature on it. You go back to the American Constitution. It is limiting what government can do to the people because the people have inalienable, inherent, enumerated rights, and the government can't do anything about it because the government doesn't give them that right. This is just the same conversation again, but we're talking about it with tech and going, okay, does the government have a right to do this, or do we have rights and the government needs to respect them? Do we need to just have that basic conversation again? Because it feels like we need to reiterate that every 10, 15 years or so. People forget it. This is just the same stuff we've always had to deal with as a free people self-governing. We're just using big terms like AI and Microsoft and Google and whatever on top of them, but it's the same problems, right?
Yeah, and I think I'll give you a recent example. We've heard from it's a couple of very good journalistic reports about private mobile data. And we saw this a little bit during the pandemic. They would tell us, oh, we've seen there's less people that are driving into downtown. Well, how do they know that? Well, they know because they have the cell towers that are tracking everyone's cell phone. Okay, but the government doesn't have that information. How are they including that in the public health statistics? Well, they actually go out and buy the data from data brokers who buy it from the cell phone companies, the towers, the infrastructure providers. I think that is something that we have to be very wary of as well, because a government needs a warrant to access certain information about your location, about what you're doing on your phone, where you are at whatever time. But if they're able to bypass that using third parties, it's the same in the UAP discussion where there's third parties, military contractors. There are ways to get around FOIA. That is something that a practice that is far too ingrained in government right now. We need to be sure that we uphold these restrictions. These are negative rights that we have, freedom from. And I think where we've seen a lot of that abuse has been probably with people we don't like, people who are accused of murder, shootings, drug dealers, bad guys in every television show ever. You see how far the CIA or CSI guys go, and you say, this is wonderful. But we have this fabric of a constitutional order that exists for a reason, and we can't sacrifice it, whether it be because there's a war in the Middle East and we're trying to promote one side or another. A lot of things are inherent, and I think we're losing sight of that recently, and I think technology in some cases could make it worse. So I'm dipping my toe right back in the pessimist pool.
Yeah, Yael, Ossowski. I want to round this back up to the consumer choice level, which is your wheelhouse. I think there's a good bit of just good old-fashioned corruption that rears its head with this too. We just covered on the show the Matthew Perry thing, where apparently, the TMZ paid off the law enforcement and got the story before anybody else did. Wolfgang Van Halen was tweeting about it and said, yeah, when I was in the hospital, when my dad died, we hadn't even left the hospital yet. They had it out because they paid off a medical worker. We're talking about the government doing government employees like law enforcement, healthcare employees. You were talking about healthcare reform earlier. I think that's a part of the data information war that we do need to deal with in a regulatory way, in a law enforcement way. There needs to be some real penalties to people, especially government people, especially healthcare people, who deal with personal data and just sell it off to people. Good old-fashioned corruption has been going on for forever. That's something that we practically need to do something about with ethically. That's just kind of the on-the-ground meaning of technology that we don't think about, but we're going to see more and more and more of that because you're going to have more and more medical administrators. You're going to have more law enforcement. It's going to have more access to more databases. People are going to buy that information. That seems like a hole in laws that are probably going to have to get caught up, case law, tried in court. But we need to address that part of it from a consumer level, don't we? Because that's very practical to people like, hey, you sell your car to somebody and now somebody's got your car buying history or your driving record and they just sell it to somebody, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine. We've seen it in other authoritarian countries. You get a bunch of people come out for a rally, pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, you name it. And then the police somehow get the information from the cell phone providers. They go back to those people. Hey, were you at this protest the other day? And we know that because of these records. Okay, did you get a warrant? No, we bought the information from here, there, and everywhere. The executive order written by Biden does make one very good point, in that he does say Congress should pass a national privacy law. A privacy law, something that can help protect our data privacy online, specifically when it comes to government organizations, but also would help promote innovation and allow us to be able to make our data portable if we want. And that is not yet in the cards. There's a couple states that do have privacy legislation: California, Vermont, Virginia. These are somewhat comprehensive, oftentimes too restrictive, and take, again, an influence from the European GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which goes too far. I can attest by how many cookies I have to reject each and every day. But that is something that we have to come up with. And I made a similar point around the whole argument of central bank digital currency, CBDCs. There's a lot of people who love to ban them outright and do it. The only way you can actually do things legitimately, legally, and constitutionally in the U.S., especially at the federal level, is restrict Congress from passing a law on X or Y, or restrict executive agencies from practicing some power. That's how we have to continue to view our government. We don't pass laws to try to restrict people. It's supposed to be restricting institutions of power. It's, again, how our Constitution is written. Things have changed a lot in 100 years, and we've really gone down to your own behavior, the things you buy, the things you drink, the things you smoke. But I think there has to be a return to that, because we have a system of negative rights that should be protected, that are, the basis of the American experiment. We've kind of gone too far. However, this is why technology is good, trade is good, competition is good, and we do have an out if in case we do feel we're being abridged.
Yeah, Ossowski joining us. We saw a little bit of case law along that where the courts did step in and told cops, like, no, you can't just geofence a whole group of people and start picking people out, although they're going to keep trying to do that. You can imagine how that could get used for protesters. Are you going to start targeting the smoke, the VA's a smoke-free campus, the same 4 people are outside the gate smoking every day? Are we going to start targeting smokers? Are we going to start targeting legal gun owners? Every time the Democratic Socialists want to have a rally, are they going to get targeted? Pick whatever you want. You can see where that stuff could go bad in a hurry, because there's always going to be this push-pull between the government, law enforcement. Healthcare is going to want to start getting more of your private data, especially the insurance companies, because they're going to want to find a way to get out of those insurance contracts. The healthy push-pull is going to start encroaching into that privacy stuff. What do you recommend folks look for to where the line gets crossed? Because they're always going to push it. There's always going to be that. And it's not an unhealthy thing, frankly. There should be a little bit of push-pull on the cutting edge of this stuff, because we're all trying to figure it out and technology has to advance. Give folks 1 or 2 things to look for as consumers of when it crosses the line, or when they should start reading up on it, or when it's time to start haranguing the Congress critter, or whatever the case may be.
I think the best thing to do right now is, it's not even the old, write your congressman, is just start using privacy tools to be sure you can opt out of all this stuff. So start using password managers, start using email alias things, encrypted emails, start using browsers that don't leak out all of your information. Stop allowing ads. You can block cookies if you want. All the tools already exist. And that's how you're going to be sure that you don't get your information out, and make it as easy as possible. You can go on the dark web right now and scan every large corporate data breach that you've ever had in the last 50 years, and everyone's information is there. You can find social security numbers, you can find addresses, passwords that you might have had on your Yahoo in 1999. So the best thing to do now is just to protect yourself using the tools that already exist. I think that's sincerely the best way we're going to get through this, until a federal data privacy law exists, where people will have some level of private right of action when your info is leaked. That's the best thing to do. So again, password generators, be sure you try to use a different email for various services that are important or not. Use 2-factor authentication as much as possible. That is the only way that you're really going to be able to protect yourself. It'll take a long time for Congress to do it. And I think we have it within our power to do that right now, online, at home, for our families. So why not start now?
Yeah, Yael Ossowski, our very good friend from our friends over at the Consumer Choice Centers. Great folks over there. Have a few new names, too, we'll talk about soon. Try to get some of them on the program. Let folks know where they can keep up with you, what y'all got going on, and how to follow you until we get you back on the program again, my friend.
Love it, Sir Andrew. So, yeah, we're at consumerchoicecenter.org. Active on all the social medias, as always, trying to keep up with all the trends. But you'll see kind of all of our articles, all of our media hits, clips, policy primers, and more over there on the website. So have some nice stuff. Again, things on AI, things on private rail, healthcare. We got it all coming in the next couple of weeks. I'll be sure to send it your way.
Attaboy. We love having it. Follow them. They do really good work, and we always appreciate them. Yael is one of our oldest supporters of this particular program. He tells me all kinds of tech stuff that I still don't understand. I just do what he tells me to do. Yael, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. All the best.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to Heard Tell. Let's end on a good note, and this one is fun. The NFL is playing games in Frankfurt. They played a game previous week on Sunday. They'll play another game next week. I love Frankfurt. It's my adopted European city. I loved living there when I was assigned there during my military service. I love the city of Frankfurt. It gets a bad rap. It's a business center. It was one of the cities that was completely rebuilt. Even the old Romerstad, the old interior, that's a reproduction because the city was basically flattened except for the cathedral and a couple other places during World War II. It's a business center. It gets an unfair rap as a commerce center, which it is. It's a big banking center. Remember the London stuff when Brexit happened, a lot of that went to Frankfurt because that's where Deutsche Bank and a lot of other places are. But it's a wonderful city. It's full of wonderful people. I loved living there. If you travel anywhere in Europe, chances are a lot of the times you're going to fly into Frankfurt. It's one of the busiest airports in the world. Really well-run airport. I lived there because I was stationed at Rhein-Main, which was the other side of the airport. I love Frankfurt. First European soccer game I ever went to was at the old Wald Stadium, which is this same stadium before it was rebuilt for the World Cup back 15, 20 years ago. And now the NFL is there at Frankfurt Stadium. It used to be Commerce Bank Arena. I remember when it was the Wald Stadium, the Forest Stadium. It's a special, special place. And I was thrilled to watch one of the things that got viral online. The fans there, a lot of American fans there, but a lot of European and German fans there, they were singing Country Roads, and everybody was kind of amazed at that. Listen, I've wrote about this. I'm going to link to the piece I wrote about Country Roads. I'm a West Virginia guy. That's a hymn to us. That's a sacred song to us. That's our song. Yes, I know it was written by a guy in a D.C. basement about driving to Maryland. It's our song now. Dem's the rules. I wrote a whole piece about it. It's up at the Substack, heardtell.substack.com. I'll link to it in the show notes. Read that whole piece. One of the things I mentioned is the fact that I can sit in the beer tents or a beer garden anywhere in Germany, especially during Oktoberfest. They're going to sing Country Roads. They absolutely love that song in Germany. They have for decades. It's a universal song. Everybody loves it. So, of course, the stadium was full. And they did happen to find the one guy in the crowd with a Flying WV hat on. God bless you, sir. I see you. We're everywhere. I love that song so much. And when I see a whole group of people singing it, and they even shouted the West Virginia at the end like you're supposed to, I enjoyed it. But understand, things like Country Roads is a universal thing. The Germans love it. In the piece I wrote about then West Virginia Governor Earl Ray Tomblin being in a karaoke bar on a Taiwan trip. They were doing business stuff over there. Walks in a karaoke bar in the hotel, and they're singing Country Roads. It's a universal song. It's a great song. We're thrilled to hear other people singing it, but don't be surprised when Germans are singing it, or if they sing it in England, or they sing it wherever. It's a universal truth. We all want to get home one way or the other, and Country Roads will get you there. Even if the country roads are splaned off the Autobahn in Germany, I still managed to find my way home from there too. Love the song. A little piece. We're going to link to the video. Whole crowd's got their arm around each other singing it. Love it to death. We'll link to the video. You can watch it, enjoy it. Please read my piece on Country Roads. Explains how the song was written, how it became part of WVU folklore, how it became our song. It's also got some personal stuff in there. That's how I wanted to end the program today, on one of the very best notes I got, because I love Country Roads. It's the song in my family. We often close funerals on it. It'll be at my funeral. That'll be the closing song. We love it. Hope wherever you are, Country Roads gets you to wherever you should have been home yesterday at. And that'll do it for Heard Tell. Thank you so much for joining us. We've had some really interesting growth movement in the numbers, and that's all thanks to you. We've had to replatform a couple of ways. We're back on the Coastal Carolina Radio Network in the Carolinas. Happy to be working with our buddy TK on that. And, of course, one-stop shopping, heardtell.substack.com. You subscribe to it with your email address, but it's completely free. If you want to give us money, you can do that too. But everything we do, writing, media, every episode of Heard Tell, it's all on there for free. You can share it. You can get everything we do right into your inbox. You don't have to go looking for it. Sign up for that. If you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of the podcasting platforms, or watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed, following, leave comments, leave ratings. It's a big deal to us. Lets folks know that we're worth checking out while we continue to do what we try to do, which is bring you good information to discern the times we live in. So wherever you are, across the street or around the world, here, there, or yonder, or even way over yonder in Germany or elsewhere in the world, we hope you're well. We hope you're well fed. We can't wait to talk to you again for more Heard Tell. All the music on Heard Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.
Somos la máquina.
At Baker's Pharmacy, care is what's most convenient for you. Care is being here when you need us. We're open evenings and weekends. Care is helping you save more. Most insurance plans and discount cards are accepted at your local Baker's Pharmacy. Care is saving you time by managing your prescriptions online. You can request refills, check order status, and more. Care is convenience that works for everyone. Baker's, a world of care is in store. Services and availability vary by location. Age and other restrictions may apply. For coverage, consult your health insurance company. Visit the pharmacy or our site for details. When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Folks, if you've listened to the Heard Tell program, you've heard our friend Gabriella Hoffman, but you need to make sure you're checking out her podcast, District of Conservation. It's a podcast exploring the nuances of true conservation efforts from D.C. and beyond. From topic discussions to exclusive interviews with conservation and energy newsmakers, Gabriella keeps listeners appraised of the latest news stories while elevating important voices. Listen to District of Conservation on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are played. Folks, you've heard of Ethan Brown on the Heard Tell show a couple of different times, but if you're interested in learning about how to discuss things like climate change without all the politics and doom and gloom, head over to his podcast, The Sweaty Penguin. Sweaty Penguin is a late-night comedy-style climate podcast working to add nuance, critical thinking, humor, and hope to the climate conversation. They got over 100 episodes already, breaking down weekly news stories and specific topics, from the vanilla to the ADHD to the international accountability to orangutans. Yes, I know, it's a comedy thing, so just go with it. But each time, exploring different ways we can make progress on these issues while still helping the economy, health, security, and everything else we care about. Feel overwhelmed, exhausted, or excluded by today's climate change discourse? This is the podcast for you. Find The Sweaty Penguin wherever you get your podcasts or at www.thesweatypenguin.com.